everyone, welcome to lecture. We're going to talk in this first video about our experiences in exercise and nutrition sciences. The goal of this part is to connect students' experiences to the scholarly and professional pathways in the primary exercise and nutrition science fields. There are 4 of those fields, and we're going to cover all 4 of those. The first part today is just looking at health, which is one of the major fields that we study and practice in. And hopefully these lectures, the couple of them together, will reinforce your current understanding. And hopefully it will also familiarize you with terms and concepts that you'll need moving through parts 2 and 4. Also, introducing you guys to these 4 fields, which are health, therapy, sport, and education, also helps set the learning framework for the rest, because we're going to talk about our curriculum, and we'll talk about where our curriculum touches on those fields, our research, how we address problems in each of those fields through our work, and also professionally, which of those fields we practice in. And I think this is the most important part for our students, because you are on a pre-professional program. So having that view of your profession ahead is very helpful. So I'm going to introduce again those 4 fields. I'm going to reinforce terms and concepts that you already know. That's why it's reinforced instead of introduced. Most of these things you will be familiar with and you will have heard of. I'm also going to, again, set the stage for learning about what's coming. Now, it's an important thing to highlight again. I know I mentioned it already in the course overview, but this class is a small sample of everything you're going to have an opportunity to participate in data collection and research, and opportunities that you're going to have learning in class. So as we move through this lecture, when you see a little book, that means that you're going to have a course, or you're going to have lots more of this content in a course. And this means that you're going to have research faculty that you're going to have class with, that they're doing projects related to those topics, where you see that little magnifying glass. And I'll just also say this again, we'll mention this in part 2 with research, but our faculty do like to work with students, including undergrads. So take stars and notes on areas that you might be interested in, because again, I'm aligning, that's what the little thread means. I'm aligning your experiences, like why you're here, to the things that you're going to study in class, the opportunities that you have to do research in class or outside of class, and lastly, the professional opportunities. I want those to all align. So if you know that you like biomechanics, you know that you might want to go into a field of ergonomics or engineering or prosthetics, and you would also want to attach to yourself to a study that looks at those particular types of things, maybe biomechanics or motor control. So again, big long introduction there, but that is the goal with this first part. Here are the terms and concepts. All of these are for you in the notes that I provided. Just if you want to take a screenshot, these are certainly ones that you'll want to have ready and handy during the first test. When I ask you guys in live settings, or not, I guess technically I've done this in Top Hat also, but in live setting, when we do these little things in word clouds, these are the words that pop up when we ask people about their experiences: injury, rehab, disability, athlete. But basically all of these boil down to those 4 fields. So health, that's the one we're going to talk about in this lecture. Health, by definition, is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and the absence of disease or infirmity. Now, that's the World Health Organization definition. Our majors, or our field in kinesiology and nutrition, we are more interested in the physical aspects. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have experts in the social aspects of, say, nutrition and exercise, or the mental aspects. For instance, we have a study right now looking at a compound in strawberries and mental cognition. So there's a connection there, but we tend to focus more on those physical elements of health than the other elements. If I asked you guys I asked you guys in Top Hat what physical health means to you. And I think that your answers are so intuitive, because before even learning anything, these are just a few of the responses that I immediately were like, yep, those embrace the essence of what health is and why we chose a path that is in health. A lot of us will end up in the health field, studying things that are related to human health. So, why do we care about that? Is because most of us are pretty active. We care about our bodies. We care about what we put in it, what we do with it, etc. Now, by definition, what health is, in terms of physicality and quantifiable measurements that we take to assess people's fitness, these are the 4 different elements. And we're going to talk about each of them separately, but this is a nice little study tool because most of the content within these little rows will be plenty for you to differentiate between these indicators and be able to answer test questions correctly. So assessing body composition, that's one of the major elements of health-related fitness because excess body fat or insufficient amounts of lean tissue and imbalances in those tissue compartments are not good for us. They make us more prone to metabolic diseases, more prone to injuries, falls, and all kinds of other things that are negative when we don't have lean body mass or when we have too much body fat. Now, ways that we can measure body composition are lots. This is just listing a few, and you will learn in your class, I think maybe ENS. Well, there are several actually, so no need to mention them. We're going to talk about your curriculum in part 2, but there's lots of classes that will teach you about these assessments. And you'll also have classes to teach you just about the quality of these assessments. Which are these used most often? Which have the lowest amount of error? Which are the most reliable and precise? All of those kind of elements you will study. You'll be very familiar with ways to assess body composition. Now, a lot of us are already experienced with some of these, especially in the realm of weight, body circumferences and girth measures, and even some of us have even done skin fold thickness measures before, which are another way we can measure someone's body fat. So all of these are different ways that we can do it. And I just have to mention the principle behind hydrostatic weighing because you will have a chance to do that in your exercise physiology lab. But underwater weighing is based off Archimedes' first principle that fat is buoyant in water. So when you fully submerge yourself in water and dispel oxygen out of your lungs, you'll find that your fat displaces. That's why this method is called the water displacement method, but your fat displaces from your body weight. And you can calculate your weight underwater, which is technically your lean mass. So that used to be the gold standard, and you will have a chance to do hydrostatic weighing, but it's obviously a little uncomfortable. It's completely submerged. You've got to hold your breath and get rid of all the air. It sometimes can make people feel uncomfortable. So we do have another newer, more up-to-date thing that's kind of like underwater weighing in terms of the displacement theory and mechanism, but it's called the BOD pod. And it's a dry chamber. So the dry chamber creates this pressure. Obviously doesn't hurt or anything, but it does the same thing that underwater weighing does, only without water. So somehow in this machine, it allows us to evaluate that same underwater weight. DEXA, we also have DEXA here. So if you guys, in fact, we have everything in the world to measure, assess body composition, but we also have DEXA. And the best thing about DEXA is that not only does it do lean and fat mass, like the ones we've talked about, but it also importantly does bone mass, which is something we don't care too much about when we're young, but as we get older, bone mass losses are a big deal because, falling and breaking a bone is the start of an inflammatory cascade that oftentimes ends in death for, especially really older adults. So bone density, super important, and especially if we're working with, again, older and adapted populations with musculoskeletal problems. Cardiorespiratory fitness, you'll also have a chance to assess fitness. And there are lots of ways. I don't even think I listed all of them up here. But the primary 2 ways are to do VO2 and to take heart rate. So you can do your resting heart rate and get a nice indicator of your baseline cardiorespiratory fitness. If your resting heart rate is lower than the average, then that's great. If it's higher than the average, you could probably stand to enhance your cardiorespiratory fitness. And this just implies that your body is able to efficiently deliver oxygen to all of your cells. And this, of course, happens with the vessels contracting and dilating, the heart obviously having a strong enough contraction to hit that stroke volume that we need. So heart rate is a very good indicator. A more commonly used indicator in clinical and sport settings is VO2, and specifically VO2 max. What this represents is the amount of oxygen that you can possibly consume. The more fit you are, the more oxygen you consume because your heart and your vessels and all of those things are more efficient. You have more mitochondria in your cell. There's a number of reasons, but your VO2 is an indicator of how well you can take in and use oxygen. And by measuring these gases, you can see it in the photo. By measuring those gases, you can also get an indication of the fuel that you're burning. So when we take in lots of oxygen and we expel lots of CO2, we're able to calculate that, hey, we're using fats right now because fats only are metabolized and used for energy with oxygen. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, we don't need oxygen for those. So when we're exercising and we have a lower amount of CO2 coming off, then we can basically predict that we're using a higher proportion of carbohydrates. So not only can we tell someone's fitness, but we can also tell what fuel they're utilizing with that VO2 measure. And of course, the more fat you can utilize, typically the more in shape you are, because it's the harder nutrient to utilize. You have to have oxygen available. So during your exercise, if you can create that same environment that you can create at rest, then that's ideal. Okay. Assessing muscular fitness is also done by a number of modalities. In fitness settings where people are intending to get strong and program exercise, I would say the 1 rep max is the most popular. But in therapeutic and rehabilitative settings, you might have therapists do a manual muscle test where they're literally like interpreting with their own bodies changes in your strength over time. And that is an important word. And you're going to learn more about muscular fitness assessments and all kinds of assessments, but that's an important thing to change, because not all of these have to be incredibly valid measures. They just have to be able to show progress and change over time. So if your same therapist is doing a manual muscle test on your arm strength, they're going to be able to assess you again weeks later. And that is a very reliable method of muscular assessment. Let's see, I think that's about all on that. But last health related fitness variable is flexibility. And flexibility is addressing the range of motion that a joint has in terms of, its center of rotation, the angles that it can reach. Can it get all the way to the ideal ranges? And you can do this for a good amount of joints on the body. I think I'm going to have you guys do a shoulder flexibility test, but you can do sit and reach, shoulder flexibility, hip flexibility, axial or neck flexibility. So these, again, are important as we age, because while we don't really too much think about our range of motion, and we don't a ton of times, we do skip flexibility exercises like stretching. I mean, that's research proven. But as we age, flexibility becomes one of the most important aspects, because without the ability to pull and push and reach and bend and those things, I mean, we aren't able to live alone. And we also are more susceptible to injuries. So range of motion, very important as we age, and an important measure in therapy, obviously, because when we hurt a joint, we lose range of motion, and we earn that back through rehabilitation. So let's talk about the physical activities that are related to our experiences in health. And again, we're doing terms and concepts here so that you have a good foundation understanding. So physical activity, by definition, are voluntary skeletal muscle movements to achieve a goal. Now, let's expand that and look at kinesiology. Kinesiology is a bigger, broader, wider definition that includes all human movements. That includes movements by that includes movements by smooth muscles, like the kind that's in your blood vessels, and your cardiac muscle cells, like your heart, muscles that we are not controlling. Things like blinking your eyelids. Now, kinesiology experts study all of these movements. We have people in biomechanics that study just vessel contractility. They literally study this part, how the vessels expand and contract. If you watch it, it's very subtle in the image, but see how they expand and then they change. So we have people that study the dynamics of blood flow. But mostly we are interested in physical activity. And even more than that, until we got our physical therapy program, we were even more interested in, more specifically, just exercise. So looking at those in the tier, it's kinesiology is the biggest. Physical activity is like one subset of kinesiology that involves skeletal muscle movements that are voluntary, all the way to exercise, which I guess I should hold on because we're going to move forward to that. Something important to bring up is the Surgeon General report, because I'll bring it up again when we talk about the fitness industry and really healthcare, because this was the first time in 1992 this report was published. Actually, I think the report came out in 96, but a lot of the research was put together in 92, and it showed that inactivity and diet were literally the prime causes of preventable death and early mortality. So it became a big movement, fitness and wellness and preventative medicine and exercise is medicine initiatives. And it is really the reason that we have our majors. Family and consumer sciences used to be nutrition, and kinesiology used to be physical education. That was it. I mean, you were either a doctor, a nurse, or you were a PE teacher. You didn't go into an area specialized in physical activity. So it's very cool. But this report is the origin of where we are today with our field. These are the different types of physical activities. We're going to talk about all of these in this part 1 because we are experienced with all of these. We all learned how to crawl and walk, like developmental skilled movements. We all do daily living activities. Some of us have jobs that require physical activity. So we also are all pretty familiar with exercise, even if we don't do it every single day, but there are different types. And today, the only type we're going to talk about is the health related type, because we're talking about the field of health, and that also includes regular daily living and occupational activities. So these are the kinds of activities that are relevant to taking care of our health. So if you want to work in the health field, these are the ones you'll be working with. So there are 4 different health related physical activities, and we're going to talk about each of those before we move on and talk about diet and health. So activities of daily living. Activities of daily living and instrumental, sometimes these are called intermediate, and they both have an I, so it doesn't matter, IADLs and ADLs, but activities of daily living, these 6 basic ones that you see right here are the 6 ones that are used in clinical settings to test whether people can live alone. So if a person takes an ADL test with, say, an occupational therapist, and they don't score well, and I think I have the scoring sheet, they're not able to live by themselves. They are going to depend on an assisted living facility or some kind of long-term care facility, and they might need some kind of functional fitness, like help standing and sitting and transferring, and they might need that kind of a therapy. So Katz is the guy who came up with this scale, but I bring up the red terms because, again, in your profession, in your tracking of a profession, and when you start to go out and acquire observation experiences, if you like this idea of working with people on their activities of daily living, you're in the zone of occupational therapy, and you're in the zone of working in assisted facilities, long-term care facilities, or you could be in the fitness minded area and work in functional fitness. So again, helping people who are living in these kind of facilities or at home, but with assisted care, helping them do their basic functional fitness, standing, reaching, bending, pulling, pushing. I also have to say that this looks simple, right?
Okay, so now we're going to start the exercise. I'm going to have you scoot to the edge of the chair.
I'm not sure if we actually need the audio here.
And then we're going to do 10 repetitions coming to stand while continuing to keep your arms crossed. 1.
See, actually that is kind of cool. I'm glad we have the audio on right there. The arms crossed element, that's what's making that more difficult and making her rely more on, hip flexors and balance. And the balance is a big part. And that we have a lot of faculty that research balance. So if you're into the idea of the motor control, you're going to learn more about that in that class. You're also going to learn in your gerontology class about some of the physical limitations and biological issues with aging and the reason they lose balance and neuro control. So you're going to learn more about it in those classes, but it's also a big growing area, guys, in fitness, is developing programs. Like I just said, you would think it would be easy to teach someone how to sit and stand, but the fact that their arms were crossed, that demonstrates somebody who understands the concept of balance and how we move. So this is just an article, but this is an article in a Lifetime magazine, and that is certainly a mixed age market. That is not just for older folks. And one of their premium articles in there, it's only bi-yearly publication, so it comes out twice, and one of the feature articles were about the importance of standing up. So when you see things come out in magazines, it's got the finger of the pulse on areas that will be big professionally as you walk into them. Occupational activity, another type of physical activity that's related to our health, because we need it for our livelihood. We need it to earn money. And we obviously, sometimes we have active jobs. Unfortunately, we're in a state where we mostly don't, and we have a lot more sedentary jobs than we used to. Machines have taken a lot of the occupational activities that we used to have. But occupational activity isn't always great. It does sometimes help people maintain body weight. But it does sometimes cause repetitive use injuries and risk for hyperkinesis, like things like carpal tunnel syndrome or tennis elbow, things where you're just ergonomically, you're not doing it right. And especially because the nature in which we do work for, up to 6 and 8 hours a day, it really is an important area, and it's a growing area. So they used to be called human factor engineers, because again, there were no such thing as kinesiology people and corrective exercise specialists and occupational ergonomic specialists back then. They were called human factor engineers, but Human ergonomics, there it is, that's a hard word for me to say. These people specialize in making things that are just less painful, how to vacuum without pain, how to use a hammer without pain. Here's another example of a perfect innovation in the tech space. You can see how this was not good. No one knew when they developed the mouse how much we would be using them. So over the years, we've seen the hypokinetic diseases, and now we have developed products where people, when they're on them a lot, they would obviously choose this because it's not going to create those hypokinetic diseases. So you'll learn more about the biomechanics of occupational stuff and tools, and you'll learn more about learning the appropriate mechanics of work and how you should be doing exercises correctly. And actually, there's a new certification with ACSM, which is why it's red here. It's in the fields. Corrective Exercise Specialist, CES. I'll talk with you guys in part 4, professions, but that's a really fast growing specialization because it helps people that are dealing with chronic pain use exercise to alleviate that pain. So leisure time physical activity is another type of physical activity that is, by technical definition, it's free from pressure, scheduling, anxiety, and obligation. And because of that, it's typically something that people stick with. People usually don't feel pressure to do it. They typically do things that they enjoy, whether it's like hiking or playing volleyball or surfing. Maybe it's even walking the dog. These are things, again, that are physical activities, but they're not technically exercise. They're enjoyable. They're not done at any particular intensity. And depending on a person's region, like if they have healthy weather, not healthy weather, if they have nice, stable weather where they can get outside and do activities, or they have a community that's built well, that with parks and trails, leisure time physical activity is the way to go for preventing obesity. So if you look here at this figure, you can see how these research studies show that low levels of leisure time physical activity coupled with high use of screen time is greatly related to the odds 3 times more likely to be obese. So people that do not do physical leisure time activity, they typically use screens, and they, again, are more likely to be obese and overweight. Because of that, that's where the government has come in to promote leisure time physical activity. And I think in Healthy People 2030, which we'll learn about Healthy People a little bit more when we talk about your curriculum, but Healthy People is a, every 10-year, they're the national objectives for what we need to do as a nation to get healthy. And in this last iteration, the 2020 to 2030, I think leisure time physical activity might be the number 1 physical activity goal. We want to promote physical activity because, again, the amount that you do and the nature in which you do it, it really helps with obesity prevention. I just wanted to point out with this image that physical activity and all of these different types that we're talking about, they're not always mutually exclusive. For instance, some leisure time physical activities, as we can see right here, oftentimes things like playing basketball or running, sometimes they do qualify as exercise just based on their intensity and their repetitive nature. Like running is definitely a type of exercise, but it also could be something that people do in their leisure time, maybe for conditioning, maybe not, but just to kind of point out that these aren't mutually exclusive categories. Exercise, though, is sort of mutually exclusive, and we will get to that in just a second, but leisure time physical activities are not. This is just to give you a little introduction to the concept of METs, or metabolic equivalents. And what these mean are it's the intervals above rest that your body's working. So we would be at rest, we would be at a MET of 1. And then as we started exercising, maybe walking for pleasure, the amount of oxygen we're taking in and the quickness of our metabolic system. So MET stands for metabolic equivalent. The metabolism and the way that our metabolism is speeding up is 3.5 times the amount it would be at rest. Another area in health promotion, and I think I have a little book by health promotion because you will take a whole class on ways to promote health. But besides just leisure time activity, a specific kind has been highly promoted lately, and that's dancing. Because dancing, everyone likes it. It's a really good area for middle-aged and older adults because they still enjoy doing it. It's just a difficult activity, but it has a high MET value and it ranges. This is a pretty low MET value, but it can range depending on the speed of the song. So some songs elicit really high MET intensities and some songs obviously a lower one, but it's a very good area for health promotion because you like to do it. When people dance, 2 hours pass and they've had a great time instead of the 30 minutes on the treadmill that was hard, So that's why these are being promoted to such an extent. Now, health-related exercise. So this is another type of physical activity, but this one is definitely specific because it's not exercise unless it's done to improve or maintain your physical health. So even though, like for instance, say you're washing your car, that is definitely physical activity because it is voluntary, it is using those large skeletal muscles, but it's more of an activity of daily living because it's not structured, it's not repetitive, and it's not done to improve or maintain your physical health. Body composition, muscular skeletal fitness, cardiorespiratory fitness, and flexibility. Now, in terms of profession stuff in red, you're often going to see this in fitness facilities. It's often to improve physical fitness, the components like I just mentioned. It can be adapted for special populations, and it promotes disease prevention. Now, an important time to kind of stop and look down here at the books. We have a huge area in our curriculum focused on exercise. Like I mentioned before, we're the School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences. We don't always focus on health-related exercise though. There's another kind we're going to talk about in the therapy field in the next recording. That's therapeutic exercise. And that isn't what we're talking about because that is to restore physical health. This is to improve or maintain it. Slight definitions, but you'll learn a lot about health-related exercise in your exercise phys class, your exercise programming classes. So ex-phys, you're learning what the body does in response to exercise. And then in your programming class, how to take that information and design exercises to improve health or fitness, right? And then you'll also learn a lot about pathophysiology. Here's how these diseases happen. Here's how it affects someone's exercise. And then you'll be able to program exercise that is adapted for those special populations, right? So if you have diabetes or cardiovascular disease, you're still encouraged to exercise, but maybe at a little bit of a lower intensity or a different kind of duration or a different type of, maybe you're not supposed to stop your muscles from contracting the entire time. So there's different types of special populations that exercise is adapted for, and you will have a chance to do that. So you'll have an upper division class where you'll work in our adult fitness clinic with real people from the community who are coming in to have you help them with an adapted exercise program. And most of them coming have some kind of a neurological condition like Huntington's disease, MS. Some of them are just recovering from surgery and things like that, but most of them have neurological disabilities. Now, here are the guidelines for exercise participation for disease prevention. Very highly promoted. These are the guidelines that you're going to see everywhere. The bolded category are what they publicize mainstream, moderate intensity. Oopsie. That was the physical activity guidelines. That's where I got that. Didn't know I linked that in there. Actually, I think I might post that for you guys to read. Let me see if this is the current one or not. Yeah, this is the current one. I might post that for you guys to read. Let's see. So these are, again, the aerobic. There's two kinds of exercise. There's aerobic exercises and anaerobic exercises. So we're supposed to do aerobic kinds that end in ing 5 days a week. And we're supposed to do these kind of exercises like weight trainings, calisthenics 2 days a week. So if I asked you that, I might ask you, like, what are the guidelines for aerobic exercise? What are the guidelines for anaerobic exercise? And I'm looking for those bolded values because those are the ones that we promote. Now the question is why we promote moderate levels. Why aren't we telling everybody to go out and reach for those vigorous levels if, obviously it's a dose-dependent exercise, and health is dose-dependent, meaning that the more you do, the more it leads to health. And I'll show you that on the next slide. But then why wouldn't we go ahead and go with the highest recommended level of categories here? And the reason why is because a collection, I think this might have been close to 100,000 participants, 72 studies or something, a big systematic review, where they were able to look at the increasing health benefits with increasing physical activity levels. And you can see that the biggest impact is from low levels to moderate levels, very, very small impact from moderate to high. And the only figure that's not missing here, or the only figure that's missing, is compliance and attrition. So what tends to happen is that even though there is a dose response, that nobody sticks with this high rigorous level except people that are fit. So now you've got a small population, meeting these guidelines, but the larger of the population does not comply to that high level exercise prescription. What they do, a bigger, broader, big body of people do comply to moderate intensity physical activity. And so why not take the one with the biggest jump that the most people are most likely to comply? And I mean, that seems very logical, but this really is just how these guidelines are developed. They're taking and they're looking at the biggest impact for the biggest groups. And again, these are population-based guidelines, so they're not for individuals. You would tailor this for yourself. You would do a program for yourself based on personal fitness, but these are the guidelines, again, to prevent chronic diseases. Now we'll switch up from diet and physical activity to our experiences taking care of our health through diet. I think I just said that. So now we switch it up and we talk about caring for our health with diet instead of the physical activities that are related to our health. Let's look at the dietary aspects. So diet, by definition, are the foods and the beverages that we consume to satisfy our biological needs. Now, interestingly, if we looked at the foods and beverages that we consume, they typically fall into these 5 food groups. And you're probably familiar with this MyPlate, but it essentially shows you the proportion from each of those groups that you're supposed to have, and that's what the balance means. And it also implies that there should be a variety, and you don't really see that so much in the MyPlate, but if you visited the website, they explain the importance of getting a variety of foods within each group, because every single different color and texture, like for instance, here we've got the flowers, the leaves, the roots, the tuber, the fungi, all of these different parts of the plant and different kinds of plants provide different nutrients, and all the different colors provide different phytochemical nutrients too. So it's important to not only get all the food groups, but variety within those, okay? Also, lastly, and in fact, if you looked up the dietary guidelines, I think I have the dietary guidelines. I'll post those guys for you too, since I'm going to post the physical activity ones. But the dietary guidelines are 7, and they all really can be collapsed to these 3. Balance, variety, and then moderate use of processed foods and additives. So anything with added salt, anything with added fat or oil, anything with added sugar, any of those additives are no bueno. So we want to make sure that we're, limiting those. Moderate use. I wouldn't say to eliminate them completely because that's not feasible, but just moderate use. We're not excessively using foods and with those kind of ingredients. They're the ultra processed foods. They have a terrible health effect, and I'll explain some of the reasons why. So diet, though, is not just controlled by biological needs, okay? Oh, also red here, let me tell you why this is red. Because if you wanted to work in this field, you could go into the food and beverage field, or you could study and do research to determine people's biological nutrient needs. We have already quantified our biological needs for like the 13 basic dietary nutrients, but the rest of them, we just kind of suggest a certain amount based on what healthy people typically take in. So there is still some room, especially for less popular nutrients like, biotin and choline and minerals like vanadium. I mean, they're not very, very, very studied, very small amount of research studies. Diet is also, though, not only controlled by our biological needs, but they're also very much controlled by our behaviors, right? So behaviors are going to be driven by our culture, our past, our values. Like maybe I think I have some examples up here. Yes. Maybe we want maybe we want to be healthy. Maybe we are addicted to drinking soda. Maybe we're from a place that they have a high monounsaturated fat diet or a high carb diet, as in the case where the rice is showing. Maybe the values, maybe you only buy food that is fair trade or ecologically friendly or considers animal health and welfare. These are the things that shape what we eat, right? These are the things that shape the nutrients that we consume. And you're going to learn lots more about that in your health promotion class, your cultural foods class, and a food marketing class. Now, that's only if you're a nutrition major. If you're a kinesiology major, which I know most of you are, then you will only be taking nutrition fundamentals. And this is where you'll learn about the next few slides I'm going to cover, the basic biology of nutrition. Also something you'll learn about in your fundamentals of nutrition class and for nutrition students in that food marketing class are things like your information literacy, like how good are you at reading nutrition claims, nutrition labels, nutrition facts panels, and all that things. This one's always fun to quiz students in a live setting because it's really kind of funny how we really don't know which of these are actual. Only one of these symbols on here is regulated by the FDA, our Food and Drug Administration. The rest of these are like industry and self-company style logos that are, more and less popular, but the only one of these on here that means anything is sugar-free. So if somebody writes sugar-free on something, it has to have less than 5 grams of sugar per serving. Everything else is just an industry term. This one means that the food hasn't been treated with radiation. This one means that it didn't use workers illegally. This one means that it's been checked by the American Heart Association for fat, cholesterol, and sodium. Obviously, this one means it's grown organically, but that is not from the FDA, who is responsible for our food labeling. This means the food was made kosher. All natural is the only one that literally means nothing. All natural, there's no regulation of putting that on food, so it can mean a variety of things. Originally it was intended, no adulteration, so no heat over 100 degrees or something like that. But it's been really stretched now to a lot of things, like no additives. People are putting all natural. It's a very loose criteria. And then the non-GMO is another one that's kind of like the USDA. There's obviously the GMO organization is a certifying agency that you have to check in with to use that logo. But again, it's not regulated by the FDA. So people create a variety of fake versions of that exact logo and use it without any repercussions. Here's another one on information literacy. I love this one because, it's just a very common thing for them to do, but they put on the side of these bottles exactly how much they're boosting in it. And on this one, this is my favorite broccoli example my favorite is the broccoli because it has 100 milligrams. And broccoli is the only one of the things, because they have like spirulina and calaria and a bunch of weird things, chives. But broccoli is the only one that has like a standardized serving size, right? And we know what that is. It's published. It's 74 grams. So let's think about if 100 milligrams is a lot. It sounds kind of like a lot when you're looking at in the list on the back of the bottle, but it's not, because 100 milligrams is 0.001 gram. And if the serving for broccoli is 74 grams, like 700 of these bottles to get a fair amount of broccoli. So it's just a gimmick, but lots of people do it. It's like writing fat-free on licorice, Yes, it is fat-free. That doesn't mean that your body isn't going to turn into fat. We're going to talk lots more about product claims, and you'll also learn about these, but we're going to talk more about them when we talk about research, because these products and the claims that are made on them are, they're founded in research, but then they're just very loosely based on research. Products are developed because of research findings, but then the way they're marketed is a very loose interpretation of the findings. So we'll talk more about that, including this power bracelet then. There's also specialty diets, and specialty diets are those that are planned and prepared for extraordinary nutrient needs. And if you're interested in going into this field where maybe diets for pregnant people, diets for older and younger ages, you might want to go into consultation. So you would be a consultant dietitian. So that is all I have. We're going to talk in the very next part about our experiences in therapy and our experiences in sport. And we're also going to, again, it's the same format. We're going to look at our physical activity related experiences and our diet related experiences in both of those fields. Thanks for listening, guys. Talk next time.